Hey guys, my name is Kelly Perry, and I did my outline presentation on Chapter 8 of Miller, which is decision makings. I thought this was going to be a good presentation, and overall, it was a good chapter because we make decisions every day in our life, whether it be what we're going to wear for that day, where we're going to go to college, things like that. So, whether it be a small one or a big decision, and I kind of chose this one because it was close to home. I work for SUU as an admissions advisor, so I help current high school students make the decision for their future on where they want to go to college and hopefully help them make the decision to become a future T-Bird and take classes like this. So it's really close to my heart, and I've really enjoyed reading this chapter. So kind of going into it, so decision making, just a general definition, is basically that it occurs in every organization. So it can be with one individual or within a group, just when gathering information about one topic. So Nutt found that half of the decision making processes fail because of the bad decision making tactics. So in order to make a good decision, you have to make sure you follow the right tactics. So kind of the first thing that they go over are the model of decision making process. So this is going to be the rational models of decision making. This is when in classical theories, it's decision making is complete rational and logical processes within different steps. So the first one's going to be organizational members recognize a problem on which decision must be taken. The second one is the decision makers search for all the relevant information. The third one is the decision makers create a set of decisions and evaluate what would be the ultimate best decision. And last but not least is going to be the decision making process concludes when an optimal decision is identified and the decision is began and starts taking place within that organization. So Nutt also recognized as the normative method, which includes 5 stages. So the first one is formulation stage, which is determining desires and needs. The next one is going to be development stage, which is generating alternative ways to deal with options and test workability. The third one is going to be detailed processes, which you get more detail on the pros and cons of the various options. Evaluation stage is the fourth one, which is when the gathered information from step 3 is placed under intense scrutiny by the group in order to qualify the cost and benefits. The final one is the implementation stage, which the decision from stage 4 will be passed on to the management. So that's kind of your final and last stage that Nutt kind of recognized throughout the chapter. Next, we're going to discuss the alternative to rational models. So this is when March and Simon characterize the traditional approach as an optimizing model in which decision makers are attempting to actually find the single best solution to an organizational problem. So big organizations especially do run across multiple problems and they have to make them get fixed, things like that. So especially when people are hiring, you want to make sure you are good with decision making and the processes that come along with that. So Mark and Simon also see the decision making as a satisfying process in which the search is not just for a single optimal solution, but for a solution that will work well enough for dealing with the actual situation. They also state that decision makers still use logic, but do so under personal and organizational constraints. So they propose that organizational decision makers use satisfying strategies because it is not possible to make the ideal rational solution. So technically, organizational decision makers are characterized by bounded rationality. And so those are kind of the things that March and Simon went over in the chapter. Next, we kind of go over the small group decision making. So I think this is very important even in college when you are in group projects and you have to work together in throughout the decision-making process and figure out what topic you're going to go over and what you want to include within that project. With across your small group, everyone has to decide on the same thing. So over in the chapter, they discuss descriptive models of a small group decision-making, which most models of group decision-making propose that groups go through a series of phases as they systematically attempt to actually reach the decision. So Fisher identifies 4 different phases that he discusses in the chapter. So orientation phase is when group members become acquainted with each other and with the problem at hand. The second phase is going to be the conflict phase, which is possible solutions to the problem that are presented and debated. The emergence phase is the group will actually arrive at some level of consensus. And the fourth phase is going to be the reinforcement phase, which is the decision will actually be supported. So those are the 4 different phases that Fisher identified within the chapter. And so the next thing that he kind of goes over is stage models. So stage model is a model that actually explains decision behavior as the result of the group following in a systematic logic. So some scholars reject this phase model because it actually depends on the type of the decision which must be made and what kind of group needs to make the decision. And people, the person that really actually studied this was Poole. Poole has created multiple sequence models which actually describe the decision-making process groups within groups. So Poole and Roth both created a typology of decision paths typically adopted. So the next thing that kind of we discussed and went over are the effective small group decision making. So Poole's multiple sequence model is useful in highlighting the varying communicative patterns throughout the small groups when making a decision. Janice is the one that actually studied a lot of important cases in world history and came to the conclusion that interaction in these groups was actually characterized by the property of group thinking. So groupthink refers to a mode of thinking that people engage in when they are deeply involved in a cohesive in-group, when the members striving for the unanimity overrides. So basically, the best decision overrides everyone else's decision once you take the vote. So the unanimous of decision's gonna win, which is their motivation to realistically appraise alternate course action. So groupthink systems include illusion of invulnerability, illusion of morality, stereotyping, self-censorship, illusion of unanimity, direct pressure, as well as reliance on self-appointed mind guards. So even at the highest levels of government, decision makers are influenced still by human desire for things to turn out in a particular way and may therefore see things in a different light. So we kind of went over the different small group thinking and decision-making processes, but now we kind of learned how a group can actually make an effective decision, which I thought was a very important section. So functionally theory is created by 2 different theorists. They argue that effective decision making depends on group attending to critical function through group communication. So within these functions, there are 5 different things that are included. So the first one's going to be the group should have a correct understanding of the issue to be resolved. The second one is going to be the group should determine the minimalistic characteristics required in order for any alternative to be acceptable. The third one is the group should actually identify a relevant and realistic set of alternatives. The fourth is going to be the group should carefully examine the alternatives in relation to each previously agreed upon required characteristic. And the final one is the group should actually select the alternative that is most likely to have the desired characteristics. So the functional theory works through the same phases identified as above as necessary for effective individual decision making as well. So beyond rational group processes is kind of the next section that I want to go over. These are some critiques to the study of group decision making. So the literature on group decision making has been too much focused on task functions of groups and ignoring the social, emotional, and relational group aspects. So the theory of symbolic convergence is this theory considers the role of communication, such as stories and jokes that are created in a feeling of group identity. So bona fide groups basically deal with this concern of proposing the group's research considers factors such as shifting membership, permeable group boundaries, and interdependence within an organizational context. So this theory also takes into account the hallway talks, which are important as the decision making itself. So those are kind of within the beyond rational group processes. The next kind of section that I want to go over is participation and collaboration. So participation in decision making is from the how in the decision making. We are now looking at the who in the decision making, taking the participation in decision making into an account. So Coach and French did the first research of participation in decision making, and this is the most widely studied effect of participation is actually job satisfaction. So we wanted to make sure, well, the researchers that did this wanted to make sure that people were happy in their job and how to make them more happy within their job. So they did studies on different job satisfactions to make sure the overall decision-making process was being well used. So they kind of also taught us about effective models. So the effective model of participation is based on the work of human relations and the theorists that are behind that. So this model proposed that PDM is an organizational practice that should satisfy employees' higher order needs. When their needs are met, job satisfaction should result which will result in higher motivation and raise productivity overall. The next model is cognitive model. So this model is actually based on principles of human resources approach. This model proposes that PDM improves the upward and downward flow of information in the organization. So improvement of upward information flow rests on the notion that individuals close to the work know the most about how to accomplish the work they need to get done. The improvement of the downward information flow rests on the idea that individuals who participate in decisions will be better able to implement and are better implemented. So this increases employee satisfaction in the sense as a byproduct of their participation in an important organizational decision. We also kind of learned about the different workplace democracies. So this is basically the participation in decision making, which can be instituted in the workplace in a variety of ways, ranging from casual conversations to formal representative systems and employee ownership. So Siebold and Shea both considered the wide array of participation programs used by the organizations, and work democracy actually involves realizing the standards for democratic society in the workplace and is grounded in an even more fundamental notions of free speech and human dignity. So participation within a democratic workplace is based on more than mere expectancy. It is based on humanistic ideals about how individuals should be treated and involved in the society. So basically, overall, the workplace democracy involves collaboration among multiple stakeholders. The final section that I kind of want to go over is communication and organizational knowledge. So organizations no longer see decision making as an isolated process, but rather as an ongoing system that is integrated into structures and behaviors throughout and beyond the organization. So there are a variety of ways to think about organizational knowledge. So the first one's going to be symptomatic knowledge, which is basically abstract representations that might be encoded in instruction manuals and or expert systems. The next one's going to be cultural knowledge. So this allows an organizational actor to act in coordinated ways through understanding of particular sites and systems. And then the third knowledge is informational knowledge, which basically is when people may use when they encounter an unusual situation and must move beyond what is encoded in synaptic knowledge. So Tokus argues that communication processes allow people in organizations to move among these variations types of different knowledges. So the process of knowledge management involves identifying and harnessing intellectual asserts to allow organizations to build on past experiences and create new mechanisms for exchanging and creating knowledge. This management also involves the use of explicit knowledge that is saved in documents, systems, and programs, and tactic knowledge that is held by individuals within the organization. So information-based knowledge management is most concerned with tracking data and developing processes for cataloging and retrieving those data, whereas interaction-based knowledge management is concerned with the tactic knowledge that the organizational actors hold and how interactional patterns within the organization networks can facilitate the sharing of information. So overall, this whole chapter talked about how decision-making process works, and whether it be an individual decision-making process within a group organization or within the work field. So throughout life, you're constantly making decisions, so it's very important to make sure you learn how to make correct decisions and the right way to go about them. I really enjoyed reading this chapter because it honestly helped me within my workforce and just in life in general to make sure when I'm making decisions that I'm going about them the right way.